What if that desire pulsing through your body in silence, especially when no one sees you, when even your thoughts whisper in secret, is not lust, not flaw, not shame, but a spiritual signal? What if that fire that rises uninvited, that battles you in stillness, was never yours to begin with? Chosen one, listen carefully. This was not a random temptation. This was a calculated intrusion. A secret weapon formed not to awaken your passion, but to steal your purpose. You've been taught to normalize it, to call it biology, to bow to it like instinct. But long before you had words for it, something inside you already knew. This isn't natural. It's orchestrated. You weren't just aroused, you were targeted. Because your sacred fire, your raw energy, your divine blueprint, when misdirected, feeds systems meant to keep you asleep. But when reclaimed, when purified, when mastered, it becomes resurrection. This battle is not just about urges, it's about energy. It's not about what you feel, but about where it's taking you. The war has always been for your focus, your vibration, your frequency. And you've felt it. In the moments you stared into the darkness and asked, "Why do I feel this way?" In the moments you walked away from empty pleasure, not because you were weak, but because your soul craved something deeper. That's when heaven took note. You were remembering. This is not about suppression. It's about transmutation, about remembering that the flame inside you is sacred technology, divine intelligence wrapped in sensation. And the moment you stop running from it and start refining it, everything changes. You no longer live from impulse, you live from alignment. So if something in your spirit is lighting up right now, if these words feel like they've been waiting for you, drop a comment below, "I feel this war," and subscribe. Because what you're waking up to is not lust, it's latent power, it's spiritual fire that was never meant to destroy you, but to crown you. And what comes next will show you how to turn every temptation into transcendence. Stay close. The heat you feel is the signal that you're about to rise. Before you even had the language to name it, before your mind could wrap itself around the concept of desire, you were already burning, not by accident, not by hormones, but by spiritual design. And when your soul descended into this realm, carrying a frequency too bright for the system to contain, the ancient architecture of control responded. You weren't born into a neutral world. You were born into a battlefield. The targeting didn't begin with your choices. It began with your presence. Your light disrupted the unconscious flow. Your energy, even as a child, carried an echo of remembrance that darkness couldn't ignore. And so, long before your mind awakened, your fire was being manipulated, not extinguished, but redirected. Bent, twisted, turned inward, so that the very power designed to lift you would become the burden used to bind you. That's why your earliest wounds pierced your innocence. That's why your shame and confusion were planted in moments too early to process. Because this war never used violence in obvious form, it used programming, repetition, temptation disguised as exploration. And it didn't come to punish you, it came to claim what was sacred. Because if they could hijack your sexual energy, they could short-circuit your divine compass. You felt it, that haunting contradiction between craving and calling, between the fire in your flesh and the whisper in your spirit. You were told it was just growing up, just hormones, just sin. But deep inside, something new. This wasn't just about pleasure. This was a recalibration of destiny, a cosmic detour dressed as desire. And you, chosen one, you were born with the blueprint to resist it, not by force, but by remembrance, because the real battle was never external. It was planted inside your body, inside your instincts, in the most sacred part of you, where your spirit meets the flesh. The war is subtle. It arrives as silence, as longing, as a thought you didn't ask for, but can't seem to shake. And suddenly, you're consumed. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired. You've been set up to self-destruct. But that's not the end of the story, because within the manipulation, something holy remained untouched, a spark they could not steal. And that spark is waking now. It's shaking the layers of programming. It's rising through your discomfort. And it's calling you not to suppress but to reclaim, because your sexual energy is not shameful, it's sacred. It was never meant to be caged in guilt or burned in addiction. It was meant to be crowned. The system isn't threatened by your pleasure. It's terrified of your control, of your clarity, of the moment you realize you can redirect the fire and wield it instead. So every time you feel that internal friction, that holy tension between desire and destiny, know this: you're not being punished. You're being trained, invited, refined. You're being asked to rise, not in denial of the flame, but in dominion over it. This is the birth of mastery, the awakening of your sacred authority. And if these words resonate deep in your bones, if they echo truths you've always felt but never dared to speak, then don't stay silent. Declare it. Comment below. I feel the war, but I choose my power. Let your voice disrupt the algorithm. Let your spirit mark this moment as the turning point. The flame was never the enemy. It was always the teacher, and now it bows to you. You were never meant to discover this truth. They designed the world to keep you asleep, to keep you occupied with pleasures that numb and habits that drain. Because the moment a chosen one masters their sexual energy, truly learns to direct it, to hold it without being consumed, they become untouchable. They become a mirror that reflects illusion, a flame that no darkness can extinguish. That's why the attacks began early. Before you knew what desire was, something was already trying to twist it. Not because of who you were, but because of who you would become. Your purity was not just about innocence. It was about clarity, about vision, about the capacity to hear what the world cannot hear and to see what others overlook. They told you to explore freely, to indulge boldly, to embrace every impulse, but they never told you the cost. They never warned you that behind every moment of gratification there might be a fracture in your energy, your focus, your divine connection. Now you know why the craving doesn't end with the act. Now you know why the satisfaction is always followed by silence. It's not guilt, it's absence. Absence of alignment, absence of power. Because your sacred fire has been scattered, and each time it takes longer to gather it again. But not anymore. You're seeing the blueprint. You're reading between the distractions. What once seduced you now repels you. What once numbed you now feels hollow. And this is not a loss. It is a signal, a divine sign that your energy is reconfiguring itself, that your soul is starting to remember its original language, that you're no longer tolerating what dims your light, even if it once brought comfort. The truth is, if the system can't kill you, it will seduce you. If it can't break you, it will distract you. But once you become aware, its grip begins to slip. That's why they flood your senses with noise. That's why they glorify chaos, because silence is dangerous. In silence, the chosen one hears heaven again. And once you've heard that whisper from eternity, nothing the world offers will ever be enough. So hold that silence. Let it sharpen you. Because the next stage requires you to stand inside the fire without burning. And that fire is already rising. That fire within you, the one that flickers in the quiet moments, that stirs in the stillness of your soul. It was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to refine you. The craving you've been taught to fear, to suppress, to bury beneath shame is not your enemy. It is raw, divine life force, wild only because no one ever taught you how to hold it with reverence. You were told to run from your desires, but what if those desires were actually sacred blueprints encoded into your spirit? What if, instead of being a trap, they were the very tools designed to awaken your purpose? The mystics, the prophets, the anointed, They all walked through this same fire. Not one of them arrived without scars. Not one emerged without first being broken open. Because before the chosen can carry light, they must confront their own shadows. And sexual energy is the most potent of those shadows. It's seductive, powerful, primal. But in the hands of the awakened, it becomes prophecy. It becomes a weapon forged in clarity, not confusion. You've already felt it, the shift, the way certain pleasures no longer satisfy. The way you can't go back to the habits that once held you. That isn't weakness. That is the beginning of sacred transformation. Your body may still crave, but your soul has started to choose. And every time you choose alignment over escape, you rise, not just morally, not just emotionally, but spiritually. And this is where few make it. Because rising requires sacrifice, not of joy, but of distortion, not of love, but of illusion. You're not being asked to give up your fire. You're being asked to honor it, to take it back from the systems that sold it as entertainment and return it to its original altar, purpose. When your energy is no longer leaking, it builds. When your focus returns, your path clears, and the world begins to respond. Not because you chase it, but because now you radiate. The fire isn't leaving you, it's changing you. And soon, the very thing that once tried to consume you will be the fuel that carries you forward. Shall we continue deeper? There comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one where indulgence begins to taste like betrayal, not to others, but to the self. You start to realize that every time you surrender to fleeting pleasure, something eternal is postponed. It's not just guilt you feel after the high fades. It's a silence. A spiritual silence that whispers, you traded presence for a moment. And in that whisper, your soul is not condemning you, it's calling you. Back, home. This is the sacred exchange, not a denial of your human nature, but the resurrection of your divine identity. The old you sought escape, the awakening you seeks embodiment. The world taught you to numb, to scroll, to sedate your ache with images and noise. But that ache was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to be heard. It's the sound of your soul outgrowing the illusions that once kept you asleep. Can you feel it? The habits that used to distract you now feel hollow. The places that used to excite you now feel dim. The connections that once felt magnetic now leave you drained. This is not depression. This is discernment. Your spirit is no longer satisfied by imitation light. You are remembering what real energy feels like, what real connection, real clarity, real alignment tastes like. And every time you say no to distraction, not out of fear, but out of reverence, you become more powerful. Every act of restraint is a declaration, I remember who I am. Every decision to rise instead of escape becomes a spiritual offering. This is how energy transmutes. This is how craving becomes clarity. It's not about suppression, it's about transformation. Because what once tempted you now begins to train you. What once sabotaged you now becomes sacred fuel. And when that shift happens, the enemy loses ground. You reclaim territory of your mind, your time, your vision. And suddenly the war that once overwhelmed you becomes the very reason you were forged. When the fire no longer burns you but begins to build you, you enter a new realm of existence. A realm where temptation loses its power, not because it disappears, but because your perception has changed. You now see what's behind the curtain. You no longer chase fleeting highs because you've tasted something deeper. Clarity, legacy, light. This is the stage of alignment, the moment where your past no longer owns you and your cravings no longer define you. The silence within you becomes louder than the noise outside. And in that stillness, instructions start to come. Visions unfold, discernment sharpens, not because you tried harder, but because you stopped leaking the sacred. You don't walk into rooms the same anymore. You carry presence. Weight. People feel it before you speak. Some will admire you, others will fear you, but few will understand you. And that's exactly as it should be, because chosen ones were never sent to be understood. They were sent to awaken. And now, with every moment of discipline, you vibrate higher. With every choice aligned with your divine assignment, you build a future that can't be shaken. A spiritual infrastructure begins to form inside you, unseen by the world, but undeniable in the spirit. This isn't just recovery. This is resurrection. And in that resurrection, a new version of you is emerging, not just healed, not just wise, but ready. Ready to walk in fire and not be burned. Ready to love without leaking. Ready to lead without ego. You are no longer at war with your desires. You are in partnership with your divine will. And from this alignment, your true power flows not from effort, but from embodiment. Not from proving, but from presence. And now, only one step remains, the one that carries you into the sacred conclusion of this path. There is a point on every chosen one's path when temptation stops being a test of willpower and becomes a gateway to inner mastery. This is not about simply resisting urges, it's about understanding what lies beneath them. What if that very force trying to pull you into the abyss is also the same energy that, if redirected, can elevate you to heights you've never known? What if the craving, the heat, the ache is not meant to be escaped but sanctified? This is the secret they never wanted you to discover, that your desire, when held in sacred discipline, becomes divine dominion. A power so pure, so untouchable, that it doesn't just affect your body. It reshapes your frequency, your destiny, your very presence in this world. There is a moment in every spiritual awakening when you begin to feel a shift. Not outside, but within. The things that once thrilled you now seem hollow. The connections that once fed your ego now feel like veils, hiding the truth from your soul. The urges that once controlled you begin to whisper, then tremble, then fall silent. Not because they've disappeared, but because you've grown louder. You begin to command your energy rather than be commanded by it. This chosen one is the true essence of alchemy, taking the raw, wild, untamed fire of your sexual energy and forging it into clarity, strength, and sacred direction. You were not created to be consumed by this fire. You were born to carry it, to walk with it, to embody it in a way that inspires, transforms, and liberates. But first, you had to feel the full weight of the battle. You had to face the shadows that wrap themselves around your desire. You had to walk through the false lights, the illusions of intimacy, the fleeting highs, the loud distractions, until your soul began to scream, "There must be more." And that scream wasn't a sign of failure. It was the sound of your spirit breaking free. You've started to see it, haven't you? That the pleasure you once chased leaves a strange emptiness, that the satisfaction is temporary, but the silence afterward is heavy. It's not shame, it's your soul speaking, whispering that you are too sacred to be diluted, that your essence is too royal to be wasted, that your power is too ancient to be handed over to something that cannot carry it. This is the beginning of reclamation. The holy moment when you decide, not from guilt, but from recognition, to stop leaking your energy and start embodying your legacy. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming present, about learning to sit in the heat without running, to face your fire without letting it burn you down. You begin to notice your thoughts carry energy, your cravings carry codes, your responses shape your reality, and suddenly you're no longer asleep in your own story. You are awake, fully, fiercely, And with that awakening comes authority. Authority over your body, authority over your mind, authority over your calling. They told you that desire was dangerous, but they never told you why. Because when you tame it, when you harness it, it becomes the most powerful engine of your destiny. You begin to realize that lust is a counterfeit of longing. That temptation is a distraction from sacred direction, that not all hunger should be fed, some should be fasted from until it reveals its truth. And when you fast from chaos, from overstimulation, from hollow satisfaction, something miraculous begins to happen. Your inner world gets quiet, your intuition sharpens, your dreams return, your spiritual senses awaken. You begin to feel things that words can't explain. And in that silence, in that stillness, you hear the voice of your Creator again. The voice that was never gone, only muffled by noise. You were never meant to live in cycles of craving and regret. You were never designed to rise and fall with every temptation. You are not a slave to desire. You are a steward of divine energy. And once you recognize this, everything changes. Your posture changes, your choices change, your aura expands, and people feel it. They sense that you are not like the rest, not because you speak louder, but because your silence carries authority, because your restraint radiates power, because your presence feels like a mirror, one they can't avoid. This is where everything you've endured begins to make sense. Every silent battle, every night you cried out in confusion, every time you fell thinking you had failed. It was never weakness, it was spiritual labor. You were not being destroyed. You were being refined. You were not losing yourself. You were shedding layers that were never truly yours. Because beneath the craving, beyond the noise, behind every shadow, there was always a deeper call. A whisper that never left you. You were made for more. Chosen one, your journey was never about avoiding darkness. It was about becoming the light that the darkness cannot touch. You are not here to deny your fire. You are here to master it, to hold it, to channel it into something eternal. The very urges that once confused you were the raw fuel of your divine purpose. They weren't here to shame you. They were here to awaken you. Now you know this is not just about celibacy. It's not just about control. It's about direction, about energy finally returning to its source. It's about no longer offering your soul to temporary pleasure, but anchoring it in eternal purpose. It's about being so rooted in your mission that even temptation bows in reverence. Because when your spirit is aligned, when your mind is clear and your heart is pure, you don't need to seek light. You become it. The glow is no longer borrowed, no longer mimicked. It radiates from within you. And that's why the world begins to change when you walk in. Not because you speak louder, but because you are the message. You embody the frequency, you carry the code. This is why the battle was so intense. This is why the pressure came so early. Because what you are building now cannot be corrupted. And the system knows that a chosen, one fully awake, fully disciplined, and fully aligned, cannot be stopped. You weren't chosen for comfort. You were chosen for clarity, for courage, for sacred rebellion, the kind that sets souls free just by walking in truth. You were sent here not just to live, but to disrupt, to restore, to remember, and now a moment has arrived. The fire is no longer rising to consume you. It is rising to crown you. So breathe, stand tall, let the echoes of your past burn away, because ahead of you is not just a calling, it's a kingdom, a reality sculpted in silence, refined through discipline, and now, finally, ready to be revealed. If your soul has been stirred by this message, if you feel the shift inside, the alignment, the fire, then this is your time. Write in the comments below, I rise in sacred fire. Let the realm of spirit know that your awakening has begun. And if your heart knows this is only the beginning, then subscribe now. Not just for words, but for the path. Because what's coming next will not be a message. It will be a revelation. Until then, stay awake, stay aligned, stay holy. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are being forged, and we will meet again in the next sacred calling.